We'd like to welcome you again for the Tech Factor podcast by Purple Quarter. I'd like to welcome Sonia Parandekar on our show. I'm extremely excited because this is our first woman technologist on the show. Welcome to Purple Quarter's podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Sonia. Sonia, just let's talk a little bit about you. I'd like to give the audiences a cue of what you've done so far. So you did do your MS in speech processing technology. And I was actually curious let me first begin my question from there. So what prompted you to look at speech processing technology way back then?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did my undergrad in electronics and telecommunication, and signal processing is one set of subjects we go through, and I really enjoyed that. Sure. So when I was considering going abroad for studies, for higher studies, like I was looking at various different sort of fields and what might be interesting, and speech recognition, language identification, that's like a specialized stream within digital signal processing, sounded really exciting. And so I think that's kind of where I thought it might be, something for me to try out. I ended up joining this lab which focused on speech recognition and language identification. And yeah, I really enjoyed my time there.
Awesome. So you did start your career with Microsoft, and then I think you were in Groupon, moved on to Urban Ladder, from Urban Ladder to Atlassian. Just 4 different companies in about 19 years of work, if I'm right. Yeah. Would you be able to define your journey through each of these companies? What helped you make these choices? Very varied, different domains. Right. I'm curious to know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So Microsoft was a default choice. Like I studied at University of Washington in Seattle. Sure. And it's like, Microsoft is right across the bridge, and it's like a very common sort of step for most folks to do. Microsoft also at that point, if you're in Redmond, it was a cool company to be in at that point of time. So, it seemed like a good sort of interesting option. I actually originally joined one of their teams that worked on speech and speech recognition. So that also seemed like an interesting, I'll actually get to apply some of the stuff I'm doing. So that's kind of how, I'd done an internship there, really enjoyed my time there. And that's, so when I graduated, I decided to join Microsoft. I stayed with Microsoft for 8 years, which in hindsight is a long time, like maybe something for me to think through. I did, within Microsoft, though, I did move quite a bit. Like I originally joined like the speech team I mentioned, but then I was working on a Windows team for a while. I worked in Bing as well for some time, right? So, and then I worked at Office. Last team I worked there was Office. So kind of got a flavor of each. And at that point, the way Microsoft ran, all these were like different companies, right? Because their business models were different, how they operated was different. There's a lot of autonomy for like the SVPs to run these, right? So even how promotions worked, everything would be different. So, even though I did stay there for a really long time, I think I got a really nice sort of set of experiences across like building on the operating system versus, starting to look at some internet technologies as well. Yeah, I do feel like that was, I really learned how to like write good software, sort of the basics of your job, right? Like it was a good experience for me from that point of view. And then at one point we decided to move to the Bay Area. I loved Microsoft so much that I moved with Microsoft, right? And then one day I woke up and realized I'm in the Bay Area and I'm not working for a startup, like I'm working for a company like Microsoft, right? And then it just seemed like, why not try something different, and especially like a startup. So that's when I started looking around, and I joined Groupon like pre-IPO. That was really fun for me. I was so excited. Like I'd been at Microsoft, like I said, I think I was getting ready to, 8 years is a long time. I was ready to try something different. Right. So I was very excited to join Groupon. And I joined Groupon, like I'd never used a Mac before. I'd never used anything open source before. Like I'd never worked on Ruby on Rails before. I thought they were hiring me for a front-end developer role because as a front-end developer at Microsoft. Sure. And then when I joined, they're like, actually, we hired you for a back-end role. Okay. So which I was excited about because I think I did want to try that, but I didn't realize that, right, when I joined. So it was like, I think for the first few months, like I had this massive headache because everything is new. I'm trying to figure out like everything, right? Like how do you write code in Ruby to, I'd never used like an open source database before, to like all of it was new. I think that was a really good experience for me because I realized that so many of your skills are transferable, right? Like those 8 years of the grind, and and Microsoft has really prepared me for like taking on these kind of opportunities. And in startups, you get to really dig into opportunities. Like you can define, right? You can go back and say, hey, nobody's doing this. Can I do this, right? And you get a lot more of that sort of more open field kind of set of opportunities. And I really enjoyed that experience. So when like at some point at Groupon, I wanted to come back to India. So I told them, why don't I start an office for you? You guys are like hiring like crazy. Obviously everybody knows about the talent pool in India. And they were quite open to it, right? Which again, like pre-IPO, they were really looking to hire people so fast that I think they were thinking like, what's the worst she can do? She'll just go there and do nothing, right? That's not, I mean, we have nothing to lose. But I loved, like that was I think a bit of a pivotal moment for me, right? Because I moved, and I'd kind of become a manager at that point. Like I had some management experience, but not a lot. But when I moved here, it was like, luckily they did have a sales office. So it wasn't like go figure out an office. Sure. But I pretty much had to hire a team.
So you were the first technology person here?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Right. And so I had to hire a team. I'd committed to, okay, here are a bunch of projects I'll deliver. So in parallel, I'm like working on all these projects and making sure, we're making good progress and be able to deliver that as well. And like I had to decide everything, right? Like I think I got like 15 minutes with my manager in a week, and he was based out of Chicago. And that's it, like I was on my own for the rest of the time. Right. And that, I think I loved that experience, because you get rid of all these shackles of, what does this person think of me, and am I doing a good job? It's like, I need to get this done. Like I need to hire people, right? Either you've done it or you're not, right? And so I think it helped me move towards a much more of like, stop looking for validation outside, or stop like sort of, looking at things from other people's point of view. Just do what you need to do, right? And like focus a lot more on outcomes, and how you achieve those outcomes is really important as well. So I think that really helped me gain a significant amount of confidence. So that's, I did that for a while. And then, eventually I think I was ready for trying, like I'd never worked for an Indian company, and I was ready to do that. And that's kind of when I joined Urban Ladder. Right. Again, like when I joined Urban Ladder, it was 8 members in their tech team. Like 4 years later when I left, we were around 70, 80. So really got to see that journey. Sure. That was like really, really fun experience. Tough, like, we had tough times, but that's when you learn a lot, right? And I loved the team there. Like we all cherish our time there, a lot. And then, I think that's when around 4 years in Urban Ladder, I realized like Atlassian was starting an office here. Some of the folks from Groupon are part of Atlassian as well. So they were reaching out, and it sounded really fun. I think I was ready to go back to PureTech, a lot of engineers around you, sure. Right? So I think that's kind of when I thought it'd be fun to go back to that. And that's when I joined Atlassian. I've been with Atlassian for 3 years now. I manage the commerce engineering team globally. So we have I have teams in Sydney and India. We also work with some contract firms in Ukraine.
Very nice. You did the marketplace and then moved on to commerce, if I'm correct. Right? At Atlassian. So would you be able to tell me a little bit about, you said PureTech, you use PureTech for Atlassian. So could you describe the kind of technology that you go about building? I'm sure a lot of people here already know about Atlassian, that you guys build products for others, right? So would you be able to talk about, when you say PureTech, what is it that you actually were mentioning about?
I think one of the differences between PureTech and say like an operational heavy company, right, is just the impact per employee, right? And I think for me that at this point, like this point in my career, I think that became really important where, when you're, for example, when you're in e-commerce, technology is an important enabler. It can be the differentiator, but there's always that physical product. And obviously in a company like Urban Ladder, like delivering a bed is not a joke, right? Like there's a massive sort of physical element to it, which you have to solve for it at any given point of time. And it can start impacting like what's your GMV, what your margins look like and such, right? When you think of something PureTech, it's like you write a line of code and, it can like basically serve billions of people, right? And like in that instant, like the moment you deploy it. So I think that is really, really powerful, right? Sure. And I think that it just changes when you look at it even from a business point of view, right? It changes changes your margins, changes how much impact you can produce, like how, again, going back to that, impact per employee is massive, right? So I think that's kind of one of the things that attracted me. I had not done B2B before, right? I had not done enterprise before. So I think that's another, I felt like it would be really interesting to explore those parts and explore those areas as well.
So when you did front end, when you started, right, in your career, did that actually help you at Atlassian? Because enterprise, looking at it from that lens as well, you need to also look at how you engage with an enterprise customer too.
Right.
So did that help you? Because I remember you telling me once that you enjoy doing platform over.
Right.
So
it did, for sure it did. And in fact, honestly, Roopa, I feel like how enterprise software is being built is also changing, right? And especially Atlassian, like we have a pretty unique model of, like, we are a B2B company, but we pride ourselves about how B2C we are in the way we operate, right? Like majority of our customers just come to Atlassian.com and start using our products for free, right? And then they kind of start seeing value, and then number of customers they'll have more users using it. They start introducing it to more teams within their company and such, right? So I think not just the front end experience, but even my experience working like in B2C, whether it was Groupon or Urban Ladder, I think that has helped a lot. It is important to have that enterprise lens as well. So while this very low customer acquisition model is very important for us, and it helps us quite a bit. Obviously, we do have internal advocates and partners who are sort of reselling our products. So especially, for example, from a commerce point of view, when we build tooling, we do have to think of all these personas, right? And the tooling you'd build for one may look very different.
Sure. So do you think that the preference for cloud first apps has gone up rapidly, and Atlassian is majorly focused on cloud first apps, right? So would you be able to tell us what are the challenges that you face with this? That is one. I'm sure because it's an enterprise product as well, there would be, is it time bound? How does it really work? Because a B2C to a B2B shift in terms of timelines also, and the impact that you create also changes, right? Could you answer these? I'm sorry, I've asked you 3 questions at one go.
Right. No, I think they are really important questions, right? And I mean, let's talk about like cloud first. I mean, so many companies are going cloud first now, right? And it's, I think it's like multiple sort of either macro trends or paradigm shifts that are all kind of leading us towards that, right? Like, if you look at Agile, I think the Agile manifesto came out like in 2001, so it's been around for a while. But it has over this, couple of decades really changed how people operate, right? Like everybody is like, oh yeah, we are agile, right? I mean, we are not like pure agile, but everybody has embraced agile in their own way, right? And what that means is that very quick feedback loop, incrementally shipping value to customers, and all that is much easier to do in a cloud format, right? I think the other like paradigm shift has been DevOps, right? And that again has been like, I think last maybe decade or so, right? Where, like I remember when I originally started working, I had a friend, they would call it hurling software. So you write something, you hurl it over the wall to your operations team, and they do something, they get it deployed somewhere, and then your customers get to see it, right? And with DevOps, like all that has changed completely, right? And DevOps it's not just about like a mindset, it comes with its own set of practices, it comes with its own set of tooling.
Correct.
Right? And obviously Atlassian is quite at the forefront of, whether it is planning, to building, to CI/CD, providing dashboards, operations, whether it is like having folks on call, like you have this really nice set of, I guess, tool chain around it, right? And we of course integrate as well. So it's not that, because there's so many best of breed tooling around it. And I think that has, fundamentally changed how we build software, right? And like, I think it's undeniable, like, you can deploy much faster, you can scale much more easily. Like it's, like I think everybody has embraced this in their own way again, right? In Atlassian, we call it YBI, YRI. Like you build it, you run it. Like, you're responsible for it basically, right? So I think that's another really important paradigm shift that has moved all of us to cloud, right? And I think finally it is definitely how mature, like again, over the last couple of decades or so maybe, if you look at infrastructure as a service, AWS and GCP, Azure, right? As well as this idea of platform as a service. Like all these have matured so much, right? Like today, if AWS has an outage, it's like Netflix will stop working, Jira will stop working. You can't do anything, right? Like I can't order anything on big basket. Like everything stops around you. It's so ubiquitous, right? And like that's how much it has pervaded how we build, like how we think of software and how we build software, right? And then again, if you wear a customer lens as well, like this Cambrian SaaS explosion where everything is a SaaS tool now, right? And people have embraced that again because it's so easy to adopt. Like it can be one developer sitting in their own room and like they can pretty much build everything, right? Like they can adopt, a platform as a service. They can like build on top of, like, it's not just AWS and Azure anymore. So I think that's where it has fundamentally, like how we build software has changed so fundamentally, and so many of all these are very cloud native concepts, right? So I think that has changed how we operate.
Sure. So do you see, your enterprise customers asking you for a lot of customization as well? So I've used one of your Trello, just the trial version, I'll be honest, right? So what I figured is certain things don't apply to specific companies, right? So how engaging are you guys from, because you own you used to be part of marketplace in commerce as well. So how do you look at it from a technology perspective?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good question because there are many different approaches to that, right? And honestly, I think at Atlassian, we are still figuring this out because for us, we come with we call ourselves a Fortune 500,000, right? Because we have so many customers outside of the Fortune, like every Fortune 500 may be a customer, but then we have this long tail of, really small and medium-sized businesses which also use our products. And we kind of want to tailor or cater to all their needs as well, right? One, of course, is, building like a thriving ecosystem around your apps, right? So, and we actually do have a marketplace kind of showcases that, right? Where that somebody needs like timesheets, and maybe Jira is never going to build timesheets, but then you have somebody like a Tempo timesheets, which builds out that part of the capability, and then you start installing those apps on top of your products. Right. So it becomes really important to have very strong APIs available so that it becomes this ecosystem where other people are contributing to your platform quite a bit as well. Sure. Right? And we have seen that flourish quite a bit. Like just, I think, a couple of years back, the marketplace revenue hit 1 billion, in lifetime revenue. So it's like grown a lot for Atlassian, right? And it's true for Salesforce does an amazing job. They have a great ecosystem. Obviously, Microsoft has a really nice flourishing ecosystem around their products and tools as well, right? So I think that's one way to allow for customization. But for enterprises, sometimes that's not enough, right? Like if you're a bank, right, or if you're the government, you come with a very different set of requirements.
Correct.
I honestly think we are still working. Like I don't think we've completely solved for that, right?
Sure.
We are working through it. I think cloud has reached that point where there is a solution. Sometimes the solution is very hard, like data residency. Like those are really hard problems to solve. But there are solutions, right? And because cloud has grown so much, I think companies have that willingness to invest in figuring out that path forward with those as well.
Sure. See, because we do technology hiring, we've seen that hiring for a B2C is slightly easier than hiring for a B2B. So I remember you telling me that when you moved into Atlassian, it was still a very young team, very small team. How do you manage to build? Because you were already looking at such a phenomenal growth for Atlassian in India. Right? What were some of the challenges that you faced, right, while building this team for yourself?
Right. Yeah, I think it takes some time to build a brand. Like honestly, everybody knows Jira. They don't always know Atlassian. But over the last couple of years, I think we have built a nice sort of brand, like a talent brand for ourselves, right? And we see the evidence of that, like, whether it is what slot we get in some of these tier 1 campuses if we go for hiring, right? And just the kind of talent we can attract as well. And I think it's one of those where it is about, do the hard work and talk about it. Like both are important. Don't do only one, right? They go hand in hand. So we do, for example, we have a lot of tech talks. We had a She Talks Tech. We have a She Talks Tech series where we look at women within Atlassian showcasing some of the work we are doing, and again it's open for anybody who wants to join, but we do end up attracting a lot of women. And honestly, I'm always blown away by like these women come with such amazing questions, and it's great to see that like there's so much talent there, right? So I think we've taken a like fairly deliberate approach there, where we looked at like, how do you build a strong brand, but internally as well. If you see, right, when we started off this site, we wanted to make sure that it has a strong R&D presence, because of course we have IT, CSS, many other teams as well, but we've managed to keep like a very strong R&D presence, right, where it's like, I think, close to more than 50%, closer to 60% of the team is all, we are hiring for developers, product managers, design. Another thing I think that Atlassian does well, which has helped us in this aspect, is we won't hire like 3 engineers and like sort of leave them on their own to get something done, right? We'll hire like a full triad of a manager with like an engineering manager, product manager, design. We'll give them some level of ownership on the roadmap, right? So that you're excited about what you're doing and you can see the impact of your work, right? We don't have like a hub and spoke model where all decisions happen in one location, right? We operate in like, it's a pretty global company, and every office has its own set of sort of areas that they're driving. That has helped a lot as well. So we have multiple leaders in India, for example, who globally lead teams, right? Whether it is product, design, engineering. And I think all that makes a huge difference, right? Like, I think that's helped us attract talent.
Sure. So I'm going to take a cue from what you just said, product, design, engineering, right? Do you guys work like a pod where the 3 teams work together? And, what is your... If I remember correctly, you spoke about Urban Ladder when you and I spoke, and then you spoke about how you had to take care of all of these facets yourself, right? It was not just looking at a function of engineering. You had to look at product, you'd look at design. Sometimes you're involved in business-related decisions as well. So how has that experience played out for you at Atlassian?
Right. Yeah, so we do follow Triad model. Okay. So, we basically, Triad is, engineering, product management, design. Okay. And then we have Triad at many levels. So like, my Triad has a few Triads under us who have a few more Triads, like it's a pyramid. Okay. This all sounds like very perfect, right? It's funny, like I kind of joke sometimes that most people are like, my Triad doesn't work. Triads are great. But because it's not always easy, sometimes you have a level mismatch, right? But having said all that, we do lean on Triads a lot. And, when there's a lot of trust between the Triad members, it makes a huge difference, right? Like I've seen, like how I'm such an engineer sometimes, like I feel that I go and talk to my design counterpart just to balance out what I'm thinking, because I feel like design comes with a very and definitely my Triad partners, both in marketplace and here, like they've helped me think very differently, from how I would normally approach a problem, right? So I think from that point of view as well, it really helps when you have that diversity of thinking and perspective. Of course, then the Triad, like the success and failure is all tied to the Triad, so it becomes easier to say, yeah, we as a team are going to make this happen. So I think that has helped us quite a bit as well, right? I think my Urban Ladder experiences helped me a lot, because there I got exposure to working with customer service, operations, marketing. Like I got to work with, say, head off for all these departments, right? And you learn so much of their craft, which I don't think earlier I'd had that exposure. So I think that I definitely cherish that. Like that helps me. Helped me.
So if I look at it, you moved into a larger company, right? I think 2013, 2014 is when the Atlassian went IPO.
Yeah,
it's about
around that time. Yeah.
So if I were to look at when you got in, already it was a very large company. Yeah, I love the part that you're talking about Triads. How much of business related decisions do these Triads get to make? What is it that the end product that you're shipping?
Right.
Do you guys get to make that at all in a larger company?
Right. Yeah. So first, I think large also, like extra large and large. Okay. Very different, right? Like Microsoft, for example, when I was at Microsoft, it was like 60,000 people, right? And I think today Atlassian is like maybe 7,000. Like I think even that scale makes a massive difference, in how you operate. And of course, I mean, every company evolves and, there's pros and cons. Like it's very hard to say, right? This versus that. Like, but I think how you operate still, like at a 7,000 is significantly different as well. At Atlassian, what I've seen is, we do try to ensure that, like, you want every decision to be made where the information is present, right? Like it at that lowest level where you have maximum information.
Right.
And that definitely helps. And that goes back to, empowering your team, unleashing a potential. How do you unleash the potential of a team? Like, you empower the people. How do you empower that? You ensure that they are able to make those decisions, right? So we do, like, I think there are obviously certain practices we follow. We definitely lean into agile a lot, but there's a fair amount of autonomy within the team. So how you, in fact, how a Jira operates is very different from how a platform team might operate. Is very different from how, like, some team that's just starting up might operate. So I think that autonomy is critical, because that specific problem you're solving, right? And so what you need to, like, that judgment. And I think that is where tech is different, right? You value somebody's ability to judge, like, make the right judgment calls, right? And say, no, I need to lean into this looks interesting, right? Or this is the area where we should focus more, right? So I think at this scale, I see we still manage to do that relatively well. There is a big, because we follow the Triad model, design especially plays a very key role in bringing in, like, user experience and user experience research. Like, we have a pretty big team that does user experience research as well, and they bring in a lot of insights around that. Having said all of that, I think as engineers especially, it is, I mean, the onus is on all of us, right? Like, we all say we are very customer centric. But what does it mean for you? Like, sometimes if you're a platform team, your customer is, another Atlassian team using your platform.
True.
But, like, are you really looking at how they are using your, what you're building? How easy is it to adopt? So we do look at adoption quite a bit internally as well, right? And I think it is important. It's important to figure out what it means for your role. Like, how do you find out what your customers' needs are, and how do you manage to do a good job there, right?
Sure. So you did tell me that you're part of commerce. So does that involve, business-related decisions, because you're going to be part of what the customers are doing on the background in terms of payments, subscriptions? Right. So do you get involved in those pieces as well as an engineer?
We do. Again, with the Triad, I think we do share a lot of what's happening in all our world. So while my product counterpart is more involved, like, I do get to get involved in that as well. Sure. And I mean, I joke, like, we are in the critical path of every revenue generating initiative, right? Because you do need, right? Correct. If something is generating revenue, that means something in our systems has to change, and that's why commerce comes in. And then I definitely come in more from an execution point of view, but we do try to get involved as early on in that cycle as possible.
Right. Yeah. So as women technologists, I often get asked by a lot of people. So I'm just going to, poke you right there and ask you straight off. There are a few deliberations that happen around, maybe women technologists are not so hands-on.
Right.
They're not there yet in terms of technology. Do you get, do you hear that a lot as well? I mean,
do I hear that? Honestly, like, I think I've been definitely very fortunate with, be it Microsoft or Groupon, Urban Ladder. I was mentioning, one of our founders was so focused on diversity, and,
right.
And obviously Atlassian as well. Like, I think I've been fairly fortunate that, like, honestly, both statements are true, right? Like, I think it's a good time to be a woman in tech right now. There are a lot of opportunities, and people are waking up to the fact that it's important to have diverse teams. It's also true that we have a very long way to go to build an equitable workplace. Like, both statements are equally true. And I do appreciate, like, maybe I've been more on the fortunate side. I won't say that I've never had any biases or any challenges, but definitely, these companies have been awesome in terms of how open they've been or how forward thinking they've been.
Sure.
But I know that's, like, I hear many stories. So while I personally don't remember this, but I know it's not uncommon.
Sure.
To hear that.
Sure. So if I were to really ask you, if for all those women who are listening to this podcast, and who I hope I'm not being biased here, but I really want to ask you this question, to say that what is one thing that you'd like to tell them? Because we were chatting just a while back, and we said there seems to be a break in career, which leads to, which is what I tell most founders when they ask me, get me a woman technologist who's a CTO, or, who's a head of engineering. So how do we actually, fast forward into the future, how can the statistics change? For all those people just coming out of college, who are looking at maybe wanting to work with you as well, what is one thing that you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, like even before we get to what I'd like to say to them, I think personally for me, it's taken a long time to realize I should do something about, encouraging more women in tech. Like I think for a long time, my assumption was, oh, I should be a really good techie, a good engineer, and that's all right. And you realize that that's not actually true. You need to play a much more active role.
Sure.
And I think over the last couple of years, I've felt more and more comfortable sort of leaning into that more and more. And I think it's important for all of us. I think I know you're very passionate about this topic as well. So great to see some things you've been calling out as well, right? I think it's, while there's a huge crop of super talented women coming in, I think it is up to us to make sure that we help them along in their journeys, right? I think there's tremendous potential in all these women. I think maybe not one thing, but couple of things I would call out. One was personally for me that made a very big difference was, getting to the point where I was comfortable taking decisions, and over time, like really important decisions, I feel like as Indian women, there's always people around you taking all your decisions, right? Everything, like what to eat, what to wear, like somebody is there and they're figuring things out for you. Sure. Right. And like for me, I think going to the US helped, because as put in that place where I had to decide everything for me, and that I realized I suck at it. And then I started sort of trying to lean into that more and more. And I think it is a little bit like a muscle. Like you keep practicing it. When you go wrong, try to figure out what happened, and bear the consequences of it and move on, right?
Sure.
I think in work that has really helped me, where I am very deliberate about ensuring that sometimes not taking a decision can actually be really expensive, right?
Correct.
So make sure that you, depending on your role, you are leaning in, you're not holding back on that, right? So I think that is one, like really, really get good at making decisions. I think the other one would be around, like be in the driver's seat of your career, right? Think of your career as the next 40 years, right? And I think a lot of, like, especially for women, I think things should keep getting better and better. You'll have more role models, you'll have more opportunities, more recognition about the importance of diversity, and ideally not just gender diversity, right? Diversity as a whole.
Right.
If you look at the Indian ecosystem, right? Like when I graduated, honestly, like the most exciting jobs were the Wipros and the Infosys of the world, right?
True.
And then all these MNCs came in. So there's Google and Microsoft, and then all these startups came in. Now these startups are becoming unicorns and unicorns. So I think that whole, there is so many opportunities, right? And all these folks are waiting to hire like the most talented people. So I think women are definitely going to have a lot of opportunities to pick up, right?
Sure.
So think of, like, when you think of your career, don't just think of, like, oh, what happens next year, or like start planning a little bit more long term. You're going to be working for a while, right? So every decision doesn't have to be like a local maxima of, best pay pack, best title. Like I think in India, people worry about titles a lot. Like, if you look at it from a 5-year lens or a 10-year lens, it's actually not going to matter, right? Like, are you learning enough? Are you in an environment where you are enjoying yourself, right? Like, do you get joy out of your work? Like, I think that's definitely an important one. I think for at least the first 15 years, I was so busy just proving myself. I didn't even worry about, am I having, like, do I enjoy my work? Am I having a good time? Like, that was never a factor. It was all about, am I proving myself? Am I growing in my career? But I feel like if, it's important to know, right? Like, are you deriving joy out of your work? Because that's when you'll do your best work, right? Sure. So look at it much more holistically than like, am I getting promoted and what's my payback? So I think that's another one, like, lean on mentors, lean on your manager, but ultimately take full ownership, right? I don't think it's fair to say that, oh, they didn't help me. It's like, okay, if they didn't find somebody else, right?
Correct.
And figure out how to move ahead.
No, it's, very beautifully said. And I'd like to call this out aloud one more time. Life, whatever you're in life today, is actually because of the choices one makes, right? And you're just saying, make wise choices. And that will take you to the right places. Yeah. Whether be it a man or a woman does not really matter. It's important that you make wise choices. And women much more, because sometimes someone else is making the choice for you. So you're saying make your own decisions on your own. Yeah. So I love that part. I'm just going to take, we're going to replay this multiple times from our podcast as well. Yeah, but this is a beautiful piece that you've just said. Digressing from this is just for, all the technologists who are looking at joining Atlassian. I wanted to understand, what is it that you guys look for, you as a leader, when you hire people for your team? What are those 2 or 3 important skill sets in technology that you look for? 3 general skill sets that you look for. Can you talk about that, please?
Right, sure. So, we do, maybe I'll take the second half of the question first, right? We actually have 5 company values.
Okay.
Open company, no bullshit, be the change you seek, don't fuck the customer, right? Build with heart and balance. And, we actually, I think we are one of the few companies, we do a values round interview, right?
Okay.
So, because these values actually play a big role in how we operate, how we make big decisions, how we work together, how we collaborate, right? And so it is important, for somebody coming into Atlassian, if they align well with these values, if they, they can lean into them easily, they're going to thrive, right? So that's one aspect, we actually try to figure out, and, we call it the values round, but it's basically we look at your past experiences to see how well you would align to some of these, right? Which I think is pretty unique.
Sure.
So I think those are some of the more softer sort of aspects of evaluating folks. I think more on this side, right? We do some of it is fairly standard, there's a basics of algorithms, data structures, we do system programming. So I think those are fairly sort of standard. I think where we look for things differently is, what have you learned from that experience, right?
Sure.
We highly appreciate people who come and say, okay, this was a mistake I made, right? And then here's what I learned from it. And it's not very, and again, I think more maybe on the Indian mindset, it's not easy to say, in an interview, here's the mistake I made, right? And this is what I learned from it. But we really value that, somebody who is vulnerable to say, yes, obviously we've all made tons of mistakes in our lives, right? Both professionally as well, right? And so it's somebody who's willing to stand up to that and, then open to kind of, and not stop there and talk about what were your learnings, right? And what have you, what would you do differently next time? So you're able to delve into those aspects as well. We do value people, I think we do look at it a bit more holistically, we talked about triads. So we want somebody who can work effectively across all the disciplines as well. So I think that sort of a holistic mindset definitely helps as well.
Very interesting. Are you hiring for your team here in India and other regions as well?
We are always hiring.
So for all those people watching this podcast, want to get in touch with Sonia and work with her team, I'm sure we'll leave your handles along with this podcast and they can reach out to you. Any few last words before we can wrap the show up?
You talked about choices, right? Yes. It reminded me of, there's a, I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but there's a Dumbledore quote around, it is not so much your ability, but your choices that define you.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's a corollary to what you were saying, right? It is we come with a whole set of abilities, but how do you use those, right? And what are the choices you make along the way? That really defines you.
Absolutely. So on this podcast, I'll like to really share something for all those people out there who thought that engineers could only be driven by a specific section of society. I wanted to actually call this out that, Sonia, I really enjoyed this discussion with you. As much as, you're deep in tech, you're also very close to a few pet projects that you're running. I love the fact you spoke about She Talks. I'm hopeful that many more people come and participate on that She Talks, not just from Atlassian, but from everywhere else as well. We'll also put that on our handle.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, because I think together, like you rightly said, we need to promote more people who can actually look at how they can build their career, even in the engineering side of business. Yeah. So we discussed this a while back on how technologists don't have to be defined by gender. It is by capability and skills that one defines a specific role. Yeah. On that thought, thank you so much for coming over to our office, and thank you for having this lovely chat. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.